As a young man, he already demonstrated that he was definitely not going to be coloring within the lines. He was absolutely brilliant, but he did decide to drop out of college because it just wasn't inspiring. So he went to India instead and went on a spiritual journey to discover himself. In his late 20s, he co founded a company that would change the way that we take in and experience information. Not much later, he was actually fired from that company and went off to do some other things. In his early 40s, he came back with some hard won wisdom. Using the wisdom he had already gained while continuing to experiment, integrate, and gain more wisdom, he turned the company that he had originally started into a cultural force. The company is Apple, and the man is Steve Jobs, a 6'3" profile in human design. In this episode, we are covering the 6'3" role model martyr profile in human design. I'll go over both the sixth line and the third line separately, and then I'll tie them together and how they combine into this incredibly unique and wise profile. I'll go over some of the pitfalls that this profile needs to watch out for in business, as well as how to overcome those pitfalls so that they can really thrive, be on purpose, and fulfill their potential. Welcome to Heart-Centered Human Design, Emotional Intelligence, and Conscious Business, the show that empowers heart-centered entrepreneurs to use human design and emotional intelligence to create meaningful success, work-life balance, and to transform their passion and purpose into impact and prosperity. I'm your host, Vanessa Naja, human design mentor and business coach, and I love sharing this incredible system with you to help you be on purpose and fulfill your potential. Make sure to get your free customized human design purpose guide at vanessanaja.com/free guide to learn more about your unique purpose through the lens of human design, as well as some of the fears and emotional aspects that you may need to alchemize in order to really make the most of your purpose. I've already done individual episodes on both the sixth line and the third line profiles in season 1 of the podcast. And you can check out episode 35 about line 6 and 32 about line 3. So we have reached the last of the 12 profiles, the 6'3" profile, which is a very unique, visionary, and forward-thinking profile. It's very much about moving humanity forward into the future. I think Steve Jobs is a pretty great example of this. The 6'3" profile is a transpersonal destiny profile, and that means it does require other people in order to fulfill its purpose, and it learns about itself through the interaction that they have with other people. They may have a lot of relationships that seem fated, that seem like destiny, and they are very impactful on others. The 6'3" profile can be a bit challenging, especially in those early years, and I'll go about that in detail later. However, these challenges, there is so much here about gaining wisdom, this incredible wisdom that they gain through their continual experimentation and integration process that provides this vision that ultimately will move humanity into the future. Now, I'll start with the sixth line. The sixth line lives its life in 3 unique, distinct phases. The first 30 years, it lives very much like a third line in this process of trial and error, experimenting, learning what works through discovering what doesn't work. They can bump into a lot of things, places, people, make all kinds of mistakes, which aren't really mistakes for them. It's really just a learning process. And through this experimentation and this trial and error, they gain this incredible amount of wisdom that they're designed to share with others. Now, with the 6'3" profile, of course, in that first 30 years, they also have a third line in their profile, which makes them a double third line. Those first 30 years can be really just all over the place. They can be messy, they can be chaotic, and that is all part of the process. So if you are a young 6'3" or you know a young 6'3", just really being aware that this is part of your gathering wisdom, learning what doesn't work so that you can share with others what does work. Now, the third line is actually the most resilient of the lines, and the sixth line in its first life process, they're not quite as resilient. So with the 6-3, having that third line to back them up is actually really helpful. And this is not something like a 4-6 or a 6-2. They don't necessarily have that level of resilience in the first 30 years, but the 6-3 does because they have that support of their third line. Now, the second life phase for six line profiles starts at their Saturn return in their late 20s, early 30s. And this is when they take a step back to really integrate and heal everything that they went through in those first 30 years. And this is often known as the roof phase. It's like they climb up on the roof, they take this bigger perspective, which is something that the sixth line naturally has. They kind of review their life, they heal, they integrate, they can be a lot more aloof. And they are basically alchemizing everything that they have learned in those first 30 years into that role model that then happens around their Chiron return around late 40s, early 50s, when they really step out as this incredibly wise being that models for others what it is to live an authentic life. So, being a role model really is just about living life as their authentic self and demonstrating to others what it is to live a fully aligned life. It's not about doing anything specific or teaching anything in a specific way. It's really just expressing authenticity, expressing who they are, modeling what it is to live a life in full alignment. Now, the role model phase isn't guaranteed. Again, this is about living in alignment. So, a lot of times you will see people that have six lines in their profile and they are not living in alignment. They are not living an authentic life. And as a result, they really miss out on being that role model because they are not demonstrating what it is to live an aligned life. Human design helps so much with this and just personal development work in general to help people truly understand who they are, to release all of the conditioning, everything that they have taken on from others, and really step out as themselves. So that is really what that role modeling is about. And going through the deconditioning process using human design, following strategy and authority is such an important aspect and a wonderful way of doing this. Now, with the sixth line, they are visionaries. They are far seeing. They are a transition. I did 2 episodes in season 1 that go into more details about where these numbers come from with the profiles. So if you're interested, check out episode 28 and episode 29. But with the 6-3 profile, the 6 is the last line of the hexagram, and this is transitioning and moving forward into the next hexagram. So having this far-reaching vision that really only 6 lines can see, and that gives them this really incredible depth and wisdom to bring us forward into the future. Now, with the 6-3, this is the last of the profiles. You have the 6-2, then you move into the 6-3, then you move forward. The third line is also a transitional line. It moves from the lower gram of the hexagram to the upper trigram of the hexagram. And this profile, that 6-3, is just very wise and just incredibly forward thinking, visionary, forward seeing, and moving and helping move humanity forward in its highest expression. Now, with the sixth line, they definitely have a tendency towards perfectionism. They can really see potential. They want that fulfilled. They strive for excellence. And when it comes to business, you want to be really careful because if you get stuck and lost in perfectionism and nothing ever makes the cut, nothing ever actually gets put out there, and there is no business. So for six lines, it's so important to remember to strive for excellence and to know that there really is no such thing as perfection. There is continual refinement, there is continual improvement. There's always striving for better, and yet there's never going to be perfection. So remembering that finished is better than nothing, being okay with good enough and knowing you'll refine and continue to make things better is super important for a six line. Six lines also very much, trust is such a big thing for six lines. They really need to, I mean, trust is big for everybody, but with this six line, if a six line's trust is broken, getting that back can be really, really hard, if not impossible. So it's so important to find allies in business that they really can trust, to build that trust over time, and to just follow your strategy and authority as to who the right people are. Especially with a transpersonal profile like the 6-3, you are going to be drawn to and magnetized to a number of different people in your trajectory, and just really Following a strategy and authority is super important, and knowing in those first 30 years, especially, there is potentially going to be a lot of trial and error when it comes to relationships and people. Now, the third line covered it a little bit already because it's that first process of the sixth line, but it is all about experimenting, learning through trial and error, discovering what works by discovering what doesn't work, and then sharing that with the rest of us. Third lines are incredibly resilient. Having a sense of humor is really important for third lines because they're going to be bumping into a lot of things and people, and being able to laugh about what didn't work out is important. And of course, for both the six and the three, work around shame is essential because there's often conditioning, especially early in life, around making mistakes. We're taught to not make mistakes and, you're messing up too often or any of these types of things. And that's not true for a six or a three. You have to make those mistakes. You have to experiment in order to learn and figure out what works. It's absolutely essential to do that and to continue to experiment, which anybody with a third line in their profile is going to be experimenting and learning through trial and error for their entire life. So the question always to ask when something goes awry or didn't turn out the way it was expected to is, what did you learn? Because there is gold in every single one of those mistakes. And it is really about mining for the gold that moves everybody forward, because those third lines then share with the rest of the world, here's what works, and it makes a difference for everybody. I always like to talk about Thomas Edison and the thousands of different ways that he discovered that light bulbs don't work until eventually he discovered how they do work, and all of our lives were changed. Now, when we put the 6-3 together, of course, they're going to have that really, potentially highly chaotic, messy first 30 years. They will have more resilience than somebody else that has a 6 but not a 3. They are really going to love to want to try out everything. In the roof phase for the 6-3, this is definitely going to be, some of the other 6 lines, they go on the roof, they kind of stay there, they do their thing. Around age 50, they come back down. With the 6-3, they go up on the roof, they do the introspection, the reflecting, the healing, then they come back down and experiment some more, then they go back up. So with the 6-3, that roof phase may look very different than some of the other 6-line profiles. And then, of course, as they step into that role model phase, there is still going to be that continued experimentation of the third line throughout their entire lives. Now, with those 6-3s, the experimenting is super important. And what can happen, again, I already talked about this when it comes to the conditioning that we have around shame and not making too many mistakes and not messing up. The fear of failure can also creep in here because there's this history of making mistakes and, maybe you don't want to fail again, so you just don't try. And it is so important to keep experimenting because that is how you stumble onto this success. It's not this linear path of like you follow A, B, C, D, and E, and then there you end up with the success you're looking for. No, it is about stumbling, falling, getting up again, and then just failing forward until you find and discover what works for you. So, so important to continue experimenting, to face the fear of failure if that's an issue, to do the deconditioning work around shame, especially when it comes to things like making mistakes and failure, and to lean into your sense of humor. Third lines tend to have a really great sense of humor. It's important to have that sense of humor. It's important to be able to laugh at yourself when you make those mistakes. It's going to make it much easier to pick yourself up, dust yourself off, and keep experimenting. All super important for anybody with a third line, and then, of course, especially a 6-3 profile. And as always, you want to follow your strategy and authority because that is going to guide you into the right experiments. It's going to guide you into the right mistakes. It's going to guide you into what there is to learn from those mistakes and lead you on the right trajectory as you go through that 3-phase life process to ultimately step out as the role model and bring humanity forward with your far-reaching visions. So that is the 6-3 profile. And if you want to dive deeper into this, reach out to me. I would love to connect with you. We could do a reading. I have many different programs available where you can dive deeper into this work. You can check them out at my website, vanessanaja.com. I will also link that in the show notes. And I would love to hear how this episode landed for you, especially if you are a 6-3 profile. You guys are very rare. a little bit over 2% of the population, I'd love to hear how this experience is for you. Please let me know in the comments wherever you are listening or watching. I really appreciate it. And you can also contact me on Instagram at HD Vanessa Naja or Blue Sky, vanessanaja.com. Send me a message, connect with me. I would love to hear your questions, anything that comes up for you. I share regular content on both of those platforms about human design, emotional intelligence, and conscious business. Would love to connect with you there. And don't forget your free human design purpose guide at vanessanaja.com/free guide. Thank you so much for listening.